Huh, got something in the folder from r/nothowgirlswork? This'll be fun. Well, I have the dueling fighting style, so it's best for me to use one hand for my weapons to get that +2 damage bonus. Oh, okay, what the heck is... Oh, top comment. Fake. No girl plays D&D and other nerd stuff. Obviously, this was reposted to r/nothowgirlswork, but I wonder what it was originally on. One can only wonder. I know it'd be easy to point out all the women who play Dungeons & Dragons, but I think this guy knows about them. I think this is the same kind of person who gives all women a quiz show on every nerd thing to make sure they're a real gamer. We are just about... Can I ask you some questions? What? Okay, sure. Do you like Dungeons & Dragons? Yeah, I play a lot. Yeah, that's what they all say. What is that supposed to mean? Who is the demon prince that controls a great host of undead? Orcus, I think, but we play in a homebrew world, so I don't really know much about the lore. Can you name every druid cantrip off the top of your head? No, I could name a couple of them, but I've never played a druid before, so I don't know all of them off the top of my head. Fake fan, I knew it. You can name all those cantrips, really? Yeah, I can. I bet you can't even figure out how grapple works. Do you know how grapple works? Yeah, it's just you roll strength versus dexterity. No. What? But seriously, like, how's it work? Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. It's right here. Huh, if only they could all have the good ending. I've started Dungeons & Dragons with a new group on Discord. 2 of them were new players and 2 were old players from a previous game. The player important for the story, Sarah, was a new player I had not played with before. I sent them all a short rules list, and one of the rules was that there won't be any romance with any non-player character, because I wasn't comfortable with playing that. If they had a spouse, etc. in their backstory, that was fine, but no romances with NPCs directly. Sarah tried to argue with this rule a lot, mentioning previous games where she had a romance and also online shows that had romance. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that, and she stopped asking. Look, man, I told you before, I'm just not interested in romance. But there's like so much romance in something like Critical Role or Dimension 20. I mean, why can't we do it here? Dude, citing Mercer and Mulligan ain't gonna work here, okay? I can't help but notice, but I'm not those people. I'm not Matt Mercer. I'm just not gonna do this romance for you. I'm sorry. Yes. You are. What do you mean, yes, you are? I'm not gonna do the romance. No. No, I didn't mean that. I mean, like, yes, you're Matt Mercer. No. What have you done? They all made their characters. In the 3rd session, they came across one of the earlier big bad evil guys I made for the game, a Wendigo-like monster who haunted the mountains. The party was saved by a group of hunters from a local tribe, and the monster escaped. Sarah, in particular, really liked the leader of the hunters, who was a woman. From my description, she even made artwork of her as well. Aw, that's sweet. Why do I have a feeling it's not going to end well? In the next session, the hunters took them back to their tribe, where they met the chief, who made it his mission to hunt the monster in the mountains. They also found that the hunter woman Sarah had drawn was the wife of the chief. Sarah got really upset at this. She told me that this wasn't cool, and I had only decided to make them husband and wife because she had shown interest in the woman. I told her that didn't make any sense, and she started saying how she wanted to romance the hunter, and I reminded her about my rule, which she had agreed to. She started arguing again and said that the rule was homophobic. I asked her to explain. She started saying how I could have made the chief a woman since the hunter was married to a woman. I told her that she wasn't making any sense. Oh, and she probably shouldn't call me homophobic for no reason. I also told her that I had thought of these 2 from the start, as the chief in particular was supposed to be a major NPC in the story. She said she didn't believe me, and I only done this because I didn't want Sarah's female player character flirting with the female NPC. Okay, hypothetically, if the female NPC was married to a woman, would she still be flirting with her? Because that's not ideal. Hey, I'm putting final prep in for the campaign, but I just wanted to know, is there anything like you specifically want out of the game? Like any plot lines you want to explore, or NPCs you want to meet, anything like that? Just like any sort of request? Yeah, it's important for a DM to find out and know what their players want before the game even starts. That way I can integrate it in. I was thinking adultery. What? Just generally problematic romance in general. Something just really sultry and gross. These don't seem like very D&D top. Light smut kind of stuff, like just integrated right into the campaign. What's your name again? Oh, Colleen. I knew it! The other players also argued with her. She kept arguing back with everyone until she got pissed, started crying, and left the group. Kind of curious about the aftermath, but I'll accept this humble offering of horror. You know, with all the homophobia we've been seeing in recent RPG horror stories, it's really good to know that queer people can be jerks too. It's that equal representation we love to see here at Crispy's Tavern. Okay, but seriously, this sucks. The DM set their boundary. A lot of DMs do that. This DM, they didn't want any sort of romance, and you should respect that. If you want a romantic game, cool, but look for it somewhere else. This DM's not comfortable with that, and that is their prerogative. This doesn't just apply to romance. DMs can set a variety of different boundaries for their games. Same thing with the players. But if you're going to participate in those games, those boundaries need to be accepted and respected. And like I said earlier, if you can't do that, look for another game. It's not that hard. There's nothing wrong with wanting your dream lesbian romance with a big buff hunter lady. Hell, that's the exact kind of plotline I might write in one of my games. But this DM didn't want to do that. And this player should probably have considered that before ruining the game for him. So I, she, her, decided I wanted another game. I'm in several already, so I'm not exactly hurting for play. The last time I joined a random group I found, I had a great time, so I put out an ad for a tabletop role-playing game hub of sorts on Discord, and I got a response from a player of a game that was scheduled for Wednesday nights. Cool. I don't have anything on Wednesday. It was a bit late if I caught a nap in the afternoon, but I'd be fine. This was awesome. So I joined the game. The setting is a homebrew, which was fine with me. We were exploring this massive castle. I talked to the dungeon master about a character I had in my back pocket. She's a Warforged bard. The concept was that she was a human dancer once and met her artificer husband when she lost a limb in an accident while traveling with her troupe. The husband created a beautiful porcelain limb, and the two bonded while she was getting used to it. They fell in love and got married. After a few years, she fell very, very ill, and the husband couldn't save her. So in a last-ditch effort, he transferred her soul into a Warforged body he used to match the limb. But she didn't awaken, and he thought he failed and just killed his wife, so he abandoned the construct, only for her to wake up again centuries later and try to find him, or at least what happened to him. Amazing backstory. So good. I am going to ruin it, though, because it does remind me of that Golden Arm short that went viral a little bit. You know, from Quibi. Remember Quibi? Because all I remember is that Golden Arm short with a very similar premise to your backstory. Yours is much better.
I can't take off my golden arm.
Anyway, great backstory. The DM seemed amenable to the idea, but wanted to work her into the lore of his castle. So her husband became the lord of the castle. They were both originally vampires, and she was killed by the people of his land, and he put her in that body where she just didn't wake up for a while? He was ultimately killed, and his castle fell to ruin, so my character woke up there, and she couldn't really remember much of her old life. He was oddly picky about some aspects. I wanted to use the Unearthed Arcana Dancer subclass. He gave it some heavy modifications, and then just named her moves after types of dances. I accepted those as placeholders because, whatever, this wasn't my vision, but I suppose I could find another game, eventually, to play out what I wanted. Why would the DM ruin such a perfect... Ah! Wow, a perfectly incredible and good story filled with detail, lore, and passion, and I'm being given it for my world. Yeah, who needs it? There were some red flags during this creation process. He wanted her to be shiny metal when I wanted her to be porcelain looking. He didn't like that because he thought porcelain would be too brittle. It was just a cosmetic choice though. I told him that she'd been like enameled or something. He didn't like that either. I don't know why this was such a sticking point for him, but whatever. I just went with it. Okay, this whole thing does annoy me. I do get when DMs want to reframe a player backstory to fit into their world, but number one, this player did a really good job at making this framework so that the DM doesn't need to have Warforged be an active presence because the technology is ancient and this Warforged could be one of a kind created by her husband. I mean, seriously, this backstory is so well written. I don't know if they did all this on purpose, but great job. The point is, the DM isn't only tossing out a great backstory, but they're reframing it in a lot of ways, and I think that is fine, even if here I find it very unnecessary, but it's completely changing the story. You have to be really careful with that, because if you change it too much, it doesn't feel like it belongs to the player anymore, and I think that's going to be a problem later on down the line. So the first session came, my character was at the castle, and the characters were returning to it. It should be straightforward, but the DM decided they needed to go on this boat ride to get there because for some reason their usual means of teleporting was not working. So they're on this boat when I'm sitting through 3 friggin' hours of him just throwing a bunch of random things happening to them in the boat. The player that invited me, Rogue, was getting frustrated. They thought that I might be one of these encounters, but it was apparent at this point that there wasn't any story relevance to any of this randomness, except for an encounter with some kind of all-powerful being that was in a bag that was supposed to be a really important NPC, but whilst the NPC wouldn't promise not to hurt Rogue's friends, writing 101, guys, double negatives, come on. The NPC just ended up getting thrown overboard instead. The DM got really frustrated with this. He'd apparently put a lot of work into this NPC only for them to get thrown overboard, but like, I'm kind of on Rogue's side with this. Rogue was getting impatient with the DM taking so long to bring me in. I finally got to play in the last hour of the game because Rogue insisted that if this wasn't plot relevant, then they were tired of making me wait to actually get to play. Bless them. I didn't want to be a whiner on my first session with this group, so I appreciated the advocacy. I actually later told Rogue in conversation how I originally envisioned her to look, and after that, Rogue would only ever describe her as being made of porcelain. We love the pettiness. So, they finally met me. I get to play a little bit. The DM took it upon himself to try and describe my character until Rogue interrupted him and said they'd love to hear how I describe my character. So I took over and I did this as I wanted. Afterwards, Rogue messaged me to see if I had a good time. I said I did when I got to play. This DM liked to run a bunch of extra sessions, and one of them was this tournament thing. Characters were often doing a bunch of other stuff that was happening outside of the scheduled time slot. This was the time I agreed to come, so this was the session I went to. One of the other players was only getting to play out their character's backstory through one of these side plots, so they absolutely got invested there. I get it. Another player wound up joining the party. Her character was a ranger, also connected to my character's husband. I only got to play with her a couple of times, but she seemed like a sweet girl. Her character didn't recognize mine, both because I didn't know this person myself, and because Ranger didn't know about my new Warforged body. Throughout the game, I'm getting little hints of memories and visions about my past, and I'm getting really invested there. Well, I had to sit out one of the Wednesday sessions because I was sick. I was around on the internet, but like not in a state where I could join the game. About 2 hours into what they were playing, Rogue messaged me. Apparently, they met my character's husband, and he was telling everyone my character's backstory without me there. Whew, I've been waiting to play D&D for so long. Okay, so, where were we? We're, gonna start near Rivington. Right, that's where my backstory stuff is happening. Oh, this is gonna be exciting. Oh, right, sorry, I forgot to tell you. We already did your entire backstory. What? Yeah, you weren't here. You finished my character's story while my character wasn't present. Why? I gave you like a 2-week notice that I wasn't gonna be there. Look, notice or not, that's the consequence for you not showing up to the session. Okay, you understand the consequence of this is that I'm never gonna show up again. This thing we were building up to, and he had just spilled the beans when I couldn't even be there to react to it. And it wasn't like the party didn't have other stuff they were trying to do. It wasn't like they were looking for him specifically. He just popped up and told them everything. Rogue didn't feel right about it, so they asked if I was asked about this, and I wasn't. The Ranger was there. He could have talked to Ranger about all of this. The session could have been all about her instead. She could have gotten the focus, and I would have been happy for her. She hadn't gotten any focus before that point, but instead, it was apparently, oh hey, it's you, but where's my wife? Before going into my entire backstory for the party. My character didn't even know her backstory herself. Well, needless to say, I was upset. So I went to the game channel in the Discord and told them if my story can be told without me there, that the DM doesn't really need me, and I dropped the game. I left the Discord server. I blocked the DM because I felt like he would argue with me about it, and I would have been far more hostile towards him if I wanted to be. I don't want that in my conscience, though. I ended up unblocking him a few days later when he sent me a lengthy apology. I didn't respond. I don't know if I ever will. The DM seems like the kind of guy that's more interested in the story he's trying to tell, and the story of the players and the characters that are a part of it. He's telling my character's story, and it felt like a violation of trust I had in him. These were my character's secrets. Not only that, if this was all he had planned, he could have focused on the character that was there, rather than revealing the backstory of the character that wasn't. At least, I got to know Rogue out of it. They're truly a gem. God, I really hope you get to play this Warforged someday, because this backstory is so unbelievably sick. But anyway, I've already gushed about the story, so let's move on to the other big issue besides the DM reframing things so aggressively. It's a running gag in the RPG community beyond tabletop games of doing backstories without certain companions there. I know Sungwon did a funny bit on it. I know Larian almost makes a joke of it when you do major quests without the appropriate companion characters present. Because in those video games, it does suck. You're missing out on major parts of the story when you do that. In D&D though, it's way, way worse. I mean, these are stories that people are participating in. It's not like Shadowheart, who is a non-player character. This is a person who wants to experience their story, and when you as the dungeon master run the story without them, it sucks. I mean, there have been many times where I plan a session around a player character being present, they're not present, and I reframe the session. Heck, one time I even canceled the game for that. But, you know, the DM said to heck with that, and decided to just ruin this person's backstory by revealing it while they're not there. Just rough DMing all around. It's probably been long enough now that this story can be told, as it was now nearly a decade ago when we were all in university, so various ages, from 18 to 25 were in the party. I was a fresh-faced 20-year-old in my second year of university and had opted to run a campaign of Deathwatch, the old Fantasy Flight Warhammer 40k TTRPG where you all play as Space Marines. I had experience in the system and some as a dungeon master, and felt I would be able to handle a year-long campaign with some fellow 40k nerds. I advertised within our uni society and got plenty of interest. Too much interest, as it turned out. Thus led to horror. 1. The party of 9 players. Deathwatch is not designed for 9 Marines. It really does best with 3 or 4, and most of the enemies become distinctly less dangerous when 9 heavily armed psychos are shooting at them. Okay, this takes me back. A couple of years ago, there was a bug that entered the video game Destiny that allowed players to bring in way too many people into activities. So raids meant for 6 people had 12 people instead. And yeah, some stuff was a heck of a lot less threatening. It just goes to show, adding even one person can really change the dynamic of battle. Doubling the amount of people breaks it instead. I was also absolutely incapable of properly managing the backstories, intrigue, skills, and roleplay for so many people, and I have no doubt that I ignored my players. It's not the biggest horror, but I certainly felt bad. Mind you, the players were, better. In no particular order, here is a summary of our many unique members of the party. 2 players who each want to play characters with secret agendas. A dark angel hunting fallen and an alpha legionary looking to sabotage them. I'm sorry. Aren't these Warhammer classes? Because they all sound like reward tiers in Andrew Tate's little pay occult. Dark angel. Alpha legionary. For the low price of $2.99 a month and becoming a massage. Anyway, these people were trying to sabotage the team, and that required extensive additional conversations. Both despised some of their fellow party members, and eventually one ended up killing the other during a private text-based session. One player, a space wolf. Seriously, a space wolf? This is not helping. They all sound like Andrew Tate cult members. Anyway, Space Wolf over here wanted a particular item for his character, a special axe, and would spend every downtime attempting to craft the axe, despite not having any skills for it. He also had 0 tactical awareness and would run into combat blindly every time, causing him to be nearly killed. Every time. One player would just not stop making the same joke every game. Every time there was a mystery opponent, the response was, "Is it gene stealers?" to my increasing frustration, until eventually it was a gene stealer, and they nearly killed him. One player, they engaged in 0 roleplay with any team members whatsoever. Otherwise, he was a lovely person, but just had no character to his character. One player whose gameplay was fine, but who was seemingly cursed with such a bad body. Oh, no. Please tell me you told him, because that is like my greatest fear, stinking up a room and not knowing it. Horrible. They also had a dungeon master, Moi, who responded to the group size by just making the enemies bigger, not realizing that it didn't quite matter how big they were. Focus fire meant they melted in a few turns of combat. I still cringe thinking about how easy some of those fights were. All in all, it was by no means the worst, and seemingly we all had some fun, but good lord, looking back, I do feel sorry for the few players who ended up trapped in the world's longest 8 months in that game. It must have been an insufferable experience. I'm assuming the social web had something to do with the 8-month trap. This game probably shouldn't have lasted 8 months. Look, I'm not saying you need to drop a D&D game at the first sign of trouble, but this is a lot of trouble. It's not just the amounts of players, but its compatibility between them. Players who actively dislike each other should not be playing in the same game. It's just a recipe for disaster. On top of that, players who are pissing off the DM, a DM who doesn't know how to run for this many players, it's all just leading to eventual dissatisfaction. But the problem with this is that there's not an explosion where everyone ends up leaving the game. It was just an 8-month slog. If anything, that's the worst fate possible. But hey, it's over now, and hopefully you learned a valuable lesson about finding people that you actually want to play with. My brother used to run made-up tabletop role-playing games for me and my friends.
That's a made-up
TTRPG.
TTRPG.
This all happened when I was little, and for years I had dreamt of being in a proper Dungeons & Dragons game, but never had any opportunities to do so. That is, until one of my brother's friends got wind of this and asked us to join a campaign they had going. This was great! My brother and I, 21 female at the time, made characters who were partners in crime. He was a tiefling sorcerer with a silver tongue who scammed people out of their money, and I was a stoic half-elf fighter who had assigned herself as his bodyguard. Now, my character's backstory was that she had previously been in the army and had deserted when her commander had given her orders to kill civilians, and now she was very distrustful of being forced to do anything. So it was a bit odd when the Dungeon Master decided that the way to introduce us to the story was that his NPC had saved us from a group of people who were mad that we had scammed them and that we were now in his debt and had to do what he said, as he was much stronger than us, which was how we were going to do the same quest as the characters already in the campaign. So I'm like, okay, my character is going to be unhappy about this situation, but as she was generally a pretty quiet and grumpy person until she trusts you kind of character, it didn't make a difference, especially since my brother's character didn't mind and she just followed what he did in a someone needs to make sure you don't do anything stupid that's going to get you killed kind of way. We made our characters like this so our characters would feel natural, and I, shy and socially anxious, got used to being more comfortable with this group of people that I didn't know. After a long start to the session with the other player characters getting to the shop where our characters were waiting, we are introduced to each other. The other characters are a tiefling bard, a gnome rogue, and a dragonborn fighter. When I introduce my character, there's a comment about, "Oh, of course she's playing a half-elf," in a really condescending tone. I guess since I'm a woman and thus it's stereotypical of me to play an elf character or something. Halson would like a word with you. We stan manly man-elves here at Crispy's Tavern. Also, speaking of Baldur's Gate 3, elves are the most common player character for everyone of every gender. So I don't know what these guys are talking about. I wanted to defend myself by saying I originally wanted to play a halfling, but the way the books described them, it didn't seem like her soldier pass, bold, but I just awkwardly laughed. This was before I realized that, hey, the books are guidelines, and you can go against type and be creative as long as it fits with the story. And also, I shouldn't have to defend myself at all, because there's nothing wrong with playing a half-elf, and it's almost like gender has nothing to do with it. What a concept! We've barely even met them before the Dragonborn fighter shows romantic interest in my fighter, which was, again, an odd thing, but luckily, we didn't play long enough for this to ever really come into play. This was before I knew I was ace, but I was nervous enough just to roleplay with strangers. Even if I was excited to try, the idea of adding romance into the mix definitely didn't make it less daunting. We're ordered to go kill some enemies of the NPC, so we go off. It's not long before we have our first battle, and I, playing in character rather than optimally strategizing, opt to not go for the enemy in range. You know, the one that's engaged with two of the other characters, but instead I dash to my brother's character's side even though the enemy isn't shooting and hasn't reached him yet, which was met with an air of, look at that little sister making bad tactical decisions. You know, despite the fact that I was 21, and despite me making it clear that I did it because it was important to my character to protect her squishy sorcerer friend. The bard tries to have a sly conversation with my brother's character in Infernal, but as part of our shared backstory, my character also speaks Infernal. So there's this neat moment where I get to be like, hey, I know what you're saying, so don't try anything with my buddy. And he quickly adjusts to let me in the conversation as well. I include this as one of the few moments I got to experience the kind of roleplay I was actually hoping for. We take a long rest and get ambushed, and my character is knocked out at the beginning of the fight. This isn't a problem, just how the dice fell, but the next day our Dungeon Master decides to give us inspiration for the roleplay we did previously. And he goes player to player mentioning things they did in character, and he comes to me and is like, you didn't really do anything. And thus I'm the only person who didn't get an inspiration point. Hey, Pike, I know during that last fight you were pretty much instrumental in our survival, protecting us in multiple ways, even as a new player, but, you know, honestly, we just don't see you as all that valuable. I'm sorry, wait, are you going somewhere? Now, obviously, I know that me being shy as heck and my character being stoic, I didn't do much roleplay, especially not compared to the 3 people who were already established as part of the campaign, who roleplayed mostly between themselves, but to put it as simple as this, that hurt to be told, as I thought I tried my best. At the end of the weekend, our group arrives to the final fight of the quest, a camp of enemies. The group decides to lure out some of the people inside by pretending someone is a damsel in distress, and they suggest it should be my fighter. A fighter who has a negative mod to her charisma, and whose whole thing is being stoic. Yeah, great choice. In order for this damsel in distress plot to work, we need someone who can portray vulnerability, even though it is deception. Someone with great charismatic abilities. Well, in that vein, we have prepared a series of candidates for you. Okay, good. Let's see them then. So, what did you think? Yeah, all these people seem like perfect damsel in distresses. I mean, I don't really see any problem with them. I just disagree with all of this. So they turn to the gnome, the only other character being played by a woman, and make her do it instead, even though we have a bard and a sorcerer in the party who'd be much better at the needed deception roles. But no, this was out of the question, since they were men, and it had to be a woman. For some reason. Just a theory, but I think the reason looks like this. Or this. Or this. God, there's a lot of these guys. We fought the enemies, and my character got the kill on someone who was running away and would have caused problems down the line for the group, but it didn't matter for me, because it just wasn't fun playing with said group anymore, so we stopped after that. Like I said, it was nothing crazy, but the vibes, they were not there. I wasn't having fun. Instead of getting to grow comfortable with the group, I kept being timid and quiet and getting judged for it. It definitely was not the experience I was hoping for after all those years, but luckily, 6 years later, I finally got to play in a game with a group of friends that were all on the same wavelength and I was comfortable enough with to get the get-go into really role-playing with them. And it was exactly what I dreamed it would be. Now the only horror story is that accursed scheduling, trying to figure out when we could do it again. In that case, friend, I wish you the best of luck. Yeah, this is not the worst horror story ever, but it really does showcase how you can ruin someone's first time playing the game. Like you said, the vibes weren't there, and I know that's like an ephemeral, hard to quantify thing, but it absolutely does matter. A group where you're being condescended to, where you don't feel like you get to participate, where the people there don't take you seriously, that all adds up. That all matters. And yeah, I will say this, I joke with my friends like this. Like sometimes I make fun of them for making bad tactical decisions, or make a snarky comment or two about some silly math mistake. But I've been playing with my friends for years. Could you imagine if I did that to some brand new person? I mean, I don't know what their sense of humor is like. That might come off as mean. Here, though, it's not even just snarky comments. These guys are being kind of sexist. Even if it's incidental, it still sucks. Not understanding why you're being a dick doesn't excuse being a dick, especially when this girl was just trying to have a good time. Alright, and that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on a Wednesday video. No, it's a bit weird on the date, but don't worry, RPG Horror Stories will be back on Monday where it belongs next week. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series. It's linked in the cards where we give advice to both DMs and players, old and new. And hey, while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. The DM said no, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, you can send them directly to us. There's a link to an email in the description. Send your stories that way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.